Chapter 2. The Red Sox. The Plan. Yes, Henry and Emily are good people. I owe my whole existence to Emily, I know that. But the moment I was first stretched onto Henry's foot 8 years ago, I knew there was trouble. I fit perfectly, that wasn't the problem. Henry is a good person, but my word, I've never encountered anything as unpleasant as Henry's feet. I won't go into details. Let me just say one word. Fetid. My partner endured the same stink for all those years. The loggers worked as long as there was daylight, sleeping in their camper trailer at night. Sometimes they'd work that way for 2 weeks on end, with never a shower in between, and no laundry days for us. Some might think that because there was snow on the ground that Henry didn't sweat. He did, indeed. And there were other discomforts. One time, Henry's crew was using the winch on the skidder to drag logs across a frozen beaver pond. It was spring, and Henry stepped onto a patch of thin ice and plunged in up to his waist. His boots, with us in them, sank deep into the muck bottom. Henry couldn't pull his feet out because of the suction, so they gave him the winch cable. He held on, and they pulled him out that way. They dragged him across the ice to shore, Henry laughing the whole way. Laughing all the way. Then he just shook it off as if nothing had happened. But we Sox had to endure the rest of that day in what was a most foul bilge. That night he rinsed us in icy pond water and dried us on a makeshift rack before a campfire. Henry had hung us too close to the fire. If not for the vigilance of another logger, Raymond Bigwood, we would have burned up then and there. Every year was the same. We'd hibernate in our drawer through summer. In the fall, we'd be taken out to begin our slog, and we'd endure as best we could until spring. Yes, we were washed occasionally, but then just hung out to dry. Sometimes I was frozen stiff, literally. For socks of our fiber, I couldn't imagine a less dignified station. So after 6 years, I'd had enough. I had to escape. As I've said, I tried to convince my partner to leave with me. I argued that our chances would be better if we left together. After all, an empty space on the clothesline might go unnoticed, but a single sock would immediately trigger a search that might get me caught. But my partner would hear none of it. If I was going to go, I was going to go alone. So I'd made my decision. I was going. We made a plan. Sunday laundry was my chance. Emily always hung us on the clothesline together. She'd hold us by the rim and slip the clothespin over the rope onto us, and we'd be held in place by the gentle squeeze of the wooden pin. It was never particularly tight, and sometimes I'd actually scrunched up to keep from sliding off in a wind. So I knew that if I loosened up as much as I could make it so that a good wind could pull me loose. But I had to be over the stream. The plan was this. When Emily would put us together to slide the clothespin over the line onto us, I would scrunch up to make it feel tight under the clothespin. If I was lucky enough to end up over the stream, I would loosen up and shimmy down and hope for a good wind. Some might be skeptical of my ability to scrunch and shimmy by my own will, but such ability is not rare in socks. Cheap socks from the store often did that while they were being worn. They'd scrunch up in the toe, hoping Henry would not choose them next time. I would never lower myself to that level. A sock has to do its job while it's being worn, and the socks that had bragged about that had disappeared, I presume into the garbage. Not what I would do. It was April already, and the stream that ran under the clothesline was high. If I was lucky enough to land in that beautiful snowmelt water, I'd ride that high tide to freedom. Where to? I didn't care. Anywhere but Henry's foot. So here's what happened that fateful year, 6 years after Emily so lovingly knitted us. Emily had just finished her coffee. Henry was sleeping late. It was his birthday, a Sunday, his last day of rest before the big spring rush. It was also laundry day. Winter was coming to an end at long last. Emily had noticed her ebbing tolerance for the cold over the years, that winters seemed longer and longer, even though they had always been the same, 6 months with snow, 6 months without. She mustered her energy to think positively toward the coming spring, to shake herself awake. She admired her handiwork as she held out the 2 red socks. What kind of socks last 6 years? She asked herself, and answered, socks I made for my sweetie, that's what kind. She put the socks back in the hamper, dumped the laundry into the washing machine, put in the detergent, and started the machine. Henry groggily made his way downstairs to the kitchen. For the socks, this was the day. After breakfast, Henry sipped coffee and read the paper while Emily filled the laundry basket, oblivious to the socks' escape plan. Luck being the hinge upon which all such plans swing, the 2 socks ended up close to the top of the pile. They would be hung out early, thus on the far end of the clothesline over the gully. Emily carried the basket of wet laundry to the porch, where one wheel of the long loop clothesline was attached to the side of the house. The other wheel was attached to a large screw eye in the trunk of a sugar maple across the gully from the house. This day, the gully brook was swollen with snowmelt water. The morning sun shone, and a warm spring breeze distracted Emily. She took out a white sheet, held it to the line, slipped the wooden clothespins over 2 corners, and let out the line for the 2 beloved red socks. She held them out, admiring them once more. At this moment, an odd feeling came over her, a feeling of concern. It wasn't an unpleasant feeling, but not comfortable either. Emily could not understand the strange feeling. She muttered to herself, someone is trying to send me a message, but I can't hear it. The feeling worried her, and she knew she should be careful not to say these things out loud. Pulling herself together, she held up the 2 socks, pinched their rims together, and slipped the pin over the clothesline rope onto them. She had not detected the scrunching. She drew out the line and moved on to Henry's trousers, his Boston Bruins t-shirt, a towel, and on until the basket was empty. Okay, Chapter 3, The Escape. So here's the laundry. You can see the 2 red socks way out there, right over the brook. Everything had gone according to plan. Rent as I was, that I would be leaving my partner forever, I had made up my mind. There was no going back. The morning passed into noon. Warm rays of April sunshine dried me and made me lighter. In the afternoon, the breeze grew into a wind. The shirts, the sheets, pants, socks, and underclothes all waved and fluttered as gloriously as the flags of nations. The clothesline stretched taut and pitched like waves in the wind. And then it happened. In the blink of a buttonhole, I felt myself separated. I flew tumbling through the air, away from the line, away from my partner. I'll forever remember seeing my partner alone on the clothesline, among the other clothes, but still alone. And for the first time I felt pangs of regret. So soon. For the first time it occurred to me that my selfish desire to leave would put my partner in far greater jeopardy than my own. How could I have not thought of that? I know that if I had had the capacity to cry at that moment I would have. But as it happened, I tumbled helplessly through the air, numb, unable to turn back, unable to rectify the hurt I would cause. Then I lost view of the line. I was shocked out of my sentimentality by cold water. What seemed like a dream floating through the warm spring air became a fight for my life. I must have shrunk 3 sizes when I hit that stream. Cold it was, as the banks were still covered in thick, quickly melting snow. The stream rushed violently through the gully to the culvert under the road. I had no say in wherever it would take me. I had really done it, for better or for worse. I knew it would have been no different, but that doesn't make remembering that day any easier for me. I drifted through the night, and the first light of the next day found me drifting on a big river, calm but deep and powerful. That day carried me through forests, past farm fields, and through a town until I joined other flotsam backed up behind an ice jam. I could see people on a bridge over the river using equipment not unlike the grappler loader of Henry's crew to try to break up the ice. It wasn't until late that afternoon that the river began flowing again. When it did, me and the flotsam around me were again tossed and turned, and we drifted through another night, and I lost consciousness. I came to. Had it been 1 day? 2 days? A week? I suppose I'll never know the answer to that. But I was alone again, snagged on the snapped-off end of a box elder branch that had apparently been submerged up to my present locale, some 10 feet above the water. There was nothing I could do but just hang there, and that's just what I did. That first day was pleasant enough. I guess I was lucky to have been snagged on a branch, not deposited in the mud. I was actually pretty clean, considering what I'd been through. By that afternoon, I was completely dry and comfortable. I tried not to think about my partner. I just did the only thing I could, and that was to enjoy the days when it was nice and endure the weather when it was inclement. Time mellowed the weather as spring advanced. I stuffed away the pangs of guilt as best I could, but have to admit that I was never able to shed them completely. One day, two fishermen went by in a canoe. By this time, the river was around 15 feet below me. I wasn't eager to have escaped life as a logger's sock only to become a fisherman's sock. That prospect made me appreciate the merits of my position. Ah, to be a single sock, hanging out on a limb with not a care in the world. I hoped they would not notice me, and sure enough, they did not. Perhaps I flatter myself in thinking they'd have any interest in just one sock. Anyway, I enjoyed another pleasant afternoon of idleness. And here's the picture that goes along with that. Okay. I suppose many a garment, having been cast away by its owner, comes to reflect on the question of what it is to simply be, to exist. And that train of thought would run from a sense of injustice and betrayal, ultimately to the injury of rejection. But to have cast oneself away puts the weight of that question fully on the garment itself. Hanging out on a limb is enjoyable to the extent that one remembers why one escaped in the first place. Time fogs that memory, and as days became weeks, I sank into despair. One morning, I awoke to the sound of a crow's caw. The bird swooped down from a tall pine some 100 yards upriver, and followed the river toward me, calling as it flew. It skimmed just above the water through a thin mist whose stillness belied the moving current of the river. Then the bird rose high above the mist to perch atop a tall hemlock just across the river. It sounded off again. It repeated, caw, 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 breaking the hypnotic quiet of the swirling river. The crow stayed in that spot for several minutes, apparently studying the river's course carefully. Just a second, yeah, coffee. Okay. I watched as the first rays of daybreak cut through the trees to illuminate the wispy vapor in shafts of creamy yellow light interlaced with strips of blue shadow. I had to learn to appreciate such beauty, for I had never known it before. It surprised me that love of beauty was not innate in my character. It had to be cultivated. I guessed that I'd have plenty of time for that. I knew full well that if I had not left home, I'd at that time be stuck between Henry's boot and Henry's foot. At that thought, all pangs of regret disappeared. The cool river air felt good on my unbooted yarn, and when the sunlight crept down from the top of my tree to meet me, its warmth felt even better. I had a good feeling for the prospects of this day. 6 years of wear in Henry's boot had not faded my hue, and in that sunshine I must have shone like a ripe fruit from where that crow perched, and sure enough, he spread his wings and lifted off the hemlock top, and flew flapping down and alit just above me. He hopped to the branch next to mine, and crooked his head to study me more carefully. He flapped up to my branch just behind me. I felt his beak shuffling between me and the box elder branch. He pulled me loose, and off we flew. He was a powerful flyer, and it was a glorious feeling to rise so high above the river. We rose above the treetops and left the river altogether. I saw the world as I'd never seen it before, and was thrilled. I suppose I should have been frightened, but I was not. Not at all. Now, flying through the air, if I'd been able to show any feeling at all, it would have been to laugh. For had I been a mouse, a mole, or a snake, my fate would have been certain death. But even if I dropped to the ground, nothing would happen to me. Many times in Henry's truck, I'd heard the line from that song he loved from the tape that had been stuck in the tape player when Henry had bought the truck used, the only tape that ever played in that truck. Its music was just part of the sound of the truck running. Henry never complained about it. Sometimes he'd sing along. I can't remember the words exactly, but it was something about freedom being to have nothing left to lose. At the time, those words struck me as they would any other sock. But now I understand. What has less to lose than a single sock washed down a river? I, for one, had learned exactly what that meant. The crow held me in its beak. I observed the land below me with keen interest. The river went downstream as far as I could see, to where the land met the sky. I knew that if I could follow the river upstream, and then follow the little stream up through the woods, I would see Henry and Emily's house. But the crow did not take such a meandering course. We flew for a long time, maybe an hour. Having never seen the world this way before, I became disoriented. I had no idea where I was in relation to the house. Land seemed to spread endlessly in all directions, and I wondered, just how big is the world? We began to descend in a wide spiral, circles getting tighter as we got closer to the treetops, and there I could see a tuft of sticks where another crow stood waiting. They were a pair. Their nest was high in a white pine, maybe 60 feet off the ground. We touched down lightly on the nest, and I was set down. The two crows greeted each other with familiarity. They used their beaks to stretch me out over the bed of twigs, poking me into crevices, stamping me into place with their wiry feet. I was beginning a new life as nesting material for a pair of crows. Now here's the picture that goes through the flight there, flying. Okay. All right, and so meanwhile, back at home, Emily lay in bed on a Saturday night going over her memory of that Sunday afternoon 2 weeks before, when she had gone to the porch to collect the laundry. She recalled reeling in the clothesline, removing clothespins, folding garments, placing them neatly in the basket. All had been well until she'd come to the red sock. She'd pulled off the clothespin and held the single sock. Had she not noticed the mate to that sock missing in the morning? Surely she would have noticed. She would never have put a single sock on the line without noticing. After all, they were not just any socks. They were the socks. That had been when she was just learning to knit. The memories of those days swept across her thoughts. Knitting the socks, choosing the wrapping paper, Henry's delighted and grateful face. Yes, there had definitely been both socks that morning. One must have fallen off the line. She chided herself for not taking better care to make sure they were pinned securely. She recalled that after she'd put away the laundry, she had put her boots on and gone outside to see if she could find the missing sock. She'd searched the matted grass beneath the clothesline, through the brambles in the gully, but she had not found the sock. It had been twilight, and she'd hoped that in the morning, in better light, she would find the sock. But she had not. The brook had been high. If the sock by chance had fallen into the water, there was no telling how far it would have gone. In bed, she worried that the sock might have been lost for good. The next day was Sunday, laundry day again. That evening, Henry was in the den sharpening his chainsaw. His wire-rimmed reading glasses focused his gaze upon the steely teeth of the saw as he slid a cylindrical file carefully across each tooth until its edge reflected the glint of the fly-tying lamp he used to illuminate this work. After a few strokes, he plucked each sharpened tooth, testing its bite. Then he would move on to the next tooth. Henry was wrapped in his work. Emily brought the laundry in from the clothesline just after dinner. While Henry sharpened his saw, Emily folded shirts and put them in their drawer in the bureau. She hung pants on hangers and placed them in the closet. She sorted the clothes one by one, putting them all in their proper places. That single red sock hung over the side of the single sock box. She had left it that way, hoping that she would find its partner. Every time she saw it, it triggered a stream of thought. Not my partner's keeper. I'm sure they were together. I remember it clearly, she muttered aloud to herself. Her thoughts raced. There's no way I would have put a single sock on the line and pinned it no less. Nope. There had to be both socks that morning. She imagined how it might have happened. One sock could have slipped off in the wind. But how could that happen? They'd both slip off together. Again she muttered audibly. Her thoughts. 2 socks falling off together is understandable. The clothespin could have slipped, but just one? Aloud. I suppose one of them just decided it was time to go. Henry looked up from the saw teeth, breaking the spell of his work. What had Emily said? Henry did not understand what she was muttering about, but it sounded bad. He worried. Henry had begun to think himself too old to marry when he'd first met Emily. He'd had no experience at courting, and had been surprised and humbled when she had accepted his marriage plea. He sat at the table listening, wondering what he might have done to upset his dear Emily. Or was it something I failed to do? He asked himself silently. Emily lifted the lone sock, held it in her hand, and walked to the bedroom window and looked out to the last glow of a colorless sunset. "Where did it go?" she said. She put it back in the lone sock box and silently descended the stairs. The socks had been together on the clothesline. She knew that. She knew Henry had loved those socks because they reminded him that she was always with him, even if he was out working in a far-off lumber camp. She knew that Henry was such a sentimental fellow that at a time of temptation, after all, she was not naive of the realities of a logging camp. The socks would serve to promote fidelity. Henry, she thought, would believe that the socks gave him the moral strength not to stray, while Emily understood that the sight of a man wearing such socks would obviate the need for moral strength. It is a fashion only a loving wife who knitted the socks could appreciate. She came to the entrance of the den and looked at Henry. Henry looked up at her. He removed his spectacles and put down the file. His mind reeled at the thought that something he'd done had upset her. He said nothing and slowly stood, pushing his wooden chair backward. He was a lean, wiry man, not given to verbosity. "Emily, I love you more than anything in the world. You are the most important part of my life," he said. Perplexed, Emily responded, "You are the most important thing in my life, too. I love you. Are you okay, Henry?" "Well, it seemed that something was wrong. You said something about not being your partner's keeper, and me being together with someone, and no, it couldn't be that way, and where did it go? I heard you saying," he said. Emily realized that she'd been muttering aloud, and Henry didn't know it was about the sock. "Oh, no, 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 Henry. I was going over in my mind where that sock must have gone. I was just thinking out loud, I guess," she said. "Oh, I'm glad. So we're okay?" Henry asked. "Yes, Henry, we're fine," Emily said. "Let's sit," she said. She took his hand. "Henry, if I ever had a problem with you, I would talk about it directly with you. I'm not the kind of person who stews privately on suspicions," she said. "That's true, you are not. I like to think that I'm the same way, but I've never had any suspicion to test myself out," Henry said. "I know I'm not the smartest guy in the world, and I don't make much money. I know you could have found someone who could have given you a better life," he said. "Henry, had I not met you, I might have married someone else. Maybe would have had more money. Maybe would have had children. But it would not have been a better life than I have with you. Once I had met you and had fallen in love with you, there was no other choice. Had I married someone else, I would never have forgotten you. I would have always been thinking about what you'd be doing, where you might be. My mother always told me that you have to marry the one you love, period. You are a wonderful husband, Henry. You are the love of my life," Emily said. "Thank you for saying that. You are the love of my life, too," Henry said. Okay, that's the end of chapter 3.